Good morning, grinders. Welcome to the DFS pregame show here on RotoGrinders. I'm Jordan Cooper, aka blenderhd, blenderhd, and it's Monday, which means it's Monday with McCool, James McCool in the house, Patered_DFS, the co-author with me of The Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. It's a 15-hour audio masterclass that you could pick up at theoryofdfs.com. I see you guys in the YouTube chat. Max Coach, Shane Beaver, Frederick Duke, Jupocalypse, Superman, Man of Steel is here. Jacob Calloway, Sam Deal, Justin Sports, Druid27. Hit that thumbs up button. Keep my apple juice cold throughout the show. Hit the subscribe button. If you're new, hit the notification bell to let you know when we go live. James, I wanted to talk about something very, very general today. All right. Almost broader than DFS. It's based on some conversations I've had over the past couple of days in the RotoGrinders Discord, which I'm in all the time. So if you subscribe to RotoGrinders Premium, click on the link in the description below. Get $10 off your first month. Like, people ask me if I do coaching. Like, I don't do personal coaching or anything. I mean, I'm in the RotoGrinders Discord. If you have any questions, ask anything there. I have no problem, and as long as it's not a 2v2, something strategy related. Not what do you think is going to do well? I don't know. Look at the projections. That's what I do. But the difference between linear and lateral thinking, I think, is a very important concept. Like, it's not even DFS related. It's like how you think about things in general. And I think most average DFS players think too linearly. I think like most average people think too linearly, let alone just in DFS. Now, the difference between linear and lateral thinking is linear is just like step one, step two, step three. Let's say you have 5 decisions to make, and you make one after the other. Go, which decision do I have to make first? Then I have to make it this one second, this one third, this one fourth, this one fifth. Lateral thinking would be, I have these 5 decisions to make, and one decision affects the other decision. So I'm going to kind of think in ways of, well, if I do this, this affects this decision. Like, you're trying to make one strategic decision across 5 different variables at once. So you're thinking in terms of not like, okay, once I do this, I don't have to think about it anymore. Then I'm going to do this. You see that a lot in DFS, which is like, oh, do you choose your pitcher or do you choose the first baseman first? And I'm like, I don't choose anyone first. I look at the whole lineup, like, as a whole. And now, yes, if you're actually entering it in, you're like, oh, I'm thumbing in a pitcher and then I'm thumbing in, but I'm not like leaving it that way. I'm like, okay, if I play a high price pitcher, what can I not do with my bats? If I'm playing 2 studs in basketball, well, what's the downside to that? You're always weighing positives and negatives of like, if I do this, how does it affect these other 4 things? So to me, that's lateral thinking. And in DFS, so many people think linearly, where they're like, okay, it's a 6-game slate. Should I stack 5-1-1-1? Should I stack 4-3-1? It's like, you're thinking too linearly. You could stack them any way you want. It's just, depending on what you're looking to do, there may be some 5-3 stacks that are fine, that are equal to 4-1-1-1-1 stacks. That may have 2 cheap pitchers. That may have, like, all these other decision points that you're making affect one another. So, James, I know this is not something we necessarily talk in the course specifically. I mean, when we talk about roster construction, I mean, it's essentially this. You have to think of your lineup as a whole. Lineups, not players. But how do you get more in the mindset of thinking laterally rather than linearly?
It's kind of a hard thing to explain. I think that it comes with a lot of experience, first off. I think that, like, after you have done something so many times, you don't have to think so much about each individual moving piece, right? So after you've built an NBA lineup, 10,000 times, like, you don't have to think individually about, well, where am I going to get my value? Well, if I play this guy, then what does it mean about this position, blah, blah, blah. After you've played so many times, you just kind of look at the slate in general, you look at the projections, and then you build a lineup and you look at it and you're like, oh, well, I guess I ended up on this super cheap small forward. I guess that's where I might have to be punting. With baseball lineups, I think that a lot of people think very, very linearly in that they want to say, okay, well, I have to start with this pitcher, and then I have to start with this outfielder, and like you start with those things, and then you kind of, I think people get anchored into that, and that is something that we talk about in the course is anchoring, and you'll anchor to a certain thought or a certain player, and if you're thinking linearly, then like you said, you make one decision and then you forget about it. Well, if you've made the decision that you want to play Bieber and then you forget about it, then you lock yourself into the decisions that you have to make in order to afford Bieber, instead of thinking, it's a total lineup where maybe you can't afford Bieber if you want to be able to do the other things that you want to do with the rest of your lineup. So I think that a lot of it just kind of comes with an understanding and experience of building lineups over and over and over again. And the main thing that I would say in that is, when you build a lineup, like build the best lineup that you could possibly think of. Like, forget the salary cap for a second. Build the best lineup that you can think of and all of the things that you want to do, and then look at it and say, because 9 times out of 10, you're going to build the best lineup that you want to be able to build, and you're not going to be able to afford it. So then you look at it and then you try to think about it and say, okay, well, I'm going to restart, and I know that I can't do all of that. So then cut one thing out and then try to rebuild and just build a whole lineup over and over again. But never get anchored in and say, I want to do this one thing, because that one thing might stop you from being able to build a good lineup. Like that one good thing of, you want to be able to force in the Yankees. Okay, well, now you're stuck playing Julio Teheran and Chris Flexen. And it's like, are the Yankees going to put up 40 runs? Maybe, but like your pitchers suck. So you'll get locked into these things if you think too linearly. You really need to be able to make all those decisions and look at the slate and look at your lineup as a whole. And I think the best way to do that is just build a lineup, see where you end up, and then keep trying to build lineups that are kind of cutting things out here and there.
Well, also it's a matter of weighing variables together. So like when you say we look at a lineup, there are the 3 main levers. We talk about this in the course: projection, correlation, and leverage. If you want to use these broad buckets of, in the perfect world, we'd have the highest projected lineup with the most amount of correlation and a ton of leverage, right? Unfortunately, you're ever going to get into those situations where, okay, let's look at the median projection of all these players and the probabilities of them hitting their, 80th plus percentile outcome for the slate. And then find out that they're all 1% owned. Like that doesn't happen, right? You're not playing against that many stupid people that like the highest projected players, like no one's playing. So, which means you're going to now lower your projection in order to gain leverage or gain correlation, right? So we talk about that in the course about, the more projection that you dip, the more you have to make it up with the other 2 levers. The more correlation you lose in MLB, the higher projection you better be gaining, right? The less like it works in the opposite directions also. So these 3 levers work in combination with one another. So thinking linearly, it's, I need to play the highest projected lineup. It's like, no, not necessarily. And then you go, okay, well, in GPP, I want to play the highest leverage lineup. And I go, not necessarily. They go, well, I want to play the most correlated lineup. No, not necessarily. Like maybe the most correlated highest leverage lineup has such a low projection that its expected value in the contest is garbage, right? You go, okay, yeah, sure. I could take the bottom of the Pirates order and the bottom of the Rangers order. And the pitch, we had Alec Mills at 11-7 the other day, right? With the overpriced pitcher for no apparent reason. Leave 3,000 on the table. And you're like, wow, dude, this is a unique lineup. It has correlation. I have a 4-4 stack, right? And the projection is like 60 points under like every, yeah, I guess yeah, sure. You got correlation, you got leverage, but your lineup's going to be projected so much lower than 99% of the lineups in the contest. Like, did you even get enough of the other two to make up for that. Maybe not. But people think in these extremes of, well, I need to do one thing and then the next thing and then the next. Okay, I'm going to build a chalk lineup, and then they do the pivot thing of like, I'm going to build a chalk lineup, and then just instead of this guy, I'm going to play that guy. And I'm like, is that enough leverage? Like, dude, you're still playing the chalk stack this way. You're still playing. I mean, that may not even be enough leverage. You gave up 5 points in projection to be this much different. So that lineup actually, that lineup's probably worse than the original lineup, because at least the original lineup is chalky and high projected. Now you have a lineup that is nearly as chalky and way too less projected. So that's why balancing those three things, to me, that's what I consider the difference between linear and lateral thinking. Of linear thinking would be, I'm going to build, what stack should I play? Okay, I'm going to play that stack. They're going to look and go, oh, who's got a high projected stack? The Dodgers or something. Okay, I'm going to play the Dodgers. I'm going to play the best projected pitcher, right? They play Jacob deGrom and the expensive Dodgers stack. And they're like, okay, who are the best? Now, just give me the best projected players from there, which is still fine. You're playing the 6K pitcher and 3 one-offs, and one of them is like Luis Rengifo or something for 2,300 in one of your spot, in your second base spot or something. And you look at that, and you run, and you look at the projections, and you see like that's not a poorly projected lineup. It obviously has correlation. It's baseball, so you have a 5-man stack on DraftKings, and it has some leverage. You take a look; the Dodgers are still going to be owned. The DeGrom is still going to be owned, and you take a look and you go, well, with the balance of all of this, is it that great of a lineup? Well, it's like, well, I correlated. It's like, no, you're thinking too linearly. It's like maybe taking out one of the Dodgers, maybe taking out Chris Taylor at 4,700 allows you to now get a 3-man Angel stack to at least correlate with Luis Rengifo, right? So at least you're playing the 8th hitter for the Angels with like, maybe not Trout, because you can't afford Trout. And now you kept, by doing that, by taking out Chris Taylor and adding like Justin Upton or something, and now making a 4-3-1, you look at the projection of that lineup. It's the same as the lineup that you just made. It's literally that it ends up being virtually the same amount of projection, and it's less. Now you only have a 4-man Dodger stack. Chris Taylor is 20% owned. You're lowering the ownership of your lineup. And you're adding correlation now, because now you have 2 stacks. You have 4-3 in there. That lineup could be better. But then you're going to say to me, but I thought you want a 5-man stack on DraftKings. I'm like, well, that lineup that you had with a 5-man stack, based on the weighing of those 3 variables, maybe the 4-3-1 that it just switched into is a better lineup. It has a higher expected value. Maybe instead of doing 4-3-1, you go, maybe it's a large field GPP, and like Jacob deGrom's going to be 45% owned, 50% owned. There's a pitcher that's 9,800 instead of 11,200, right? That's going to be 10% owned. That could end up outscoring Jacob deGrom or whatever, or at least score enough points. So you go down, you save the 2,000 there, and now you're able to get Chris Taylor back in your 5-man Dodgers stack, and now you're able to turn Upton into Mike Trout. And you look at that lineup and you go, okay, now I have a 5-2-1, because you still have that Luis Rengifo in there, right? You still have that cheap second baseman, but you're correlating that with another Angel. You're getting obviously a ton of leverage by not playing deGrom. You see that compared to that second lineup, you lost about 5 points in projection because of the difference between deGrom and the 2 hitters and everything. But dude, you gain like 40 percentage points in ownership. So it's like, I'm willing to sacrifice 5 points for 40% in ownership. And you look at that lineup and you go, that lineup, it's not higher projected, but it has more leverage. It has more correlation. So compared to that, the first lineup you made, which makes the most sense, 5-man Dodger stack, Jacob deGrom. I mean, when people make lineups, they go, I want a 5-man stack and I want the stud pitcher. And it turns out a lineup that doesn't have a 5-man stack and a lineup that doesn't have the stud pitcher may actually, in a large field GPP, may have a higher expectation, then these hard, fast rules of like you got to play a 5-man stack, or you got to play the stud pitcher, or you got to play like stop thinking linearly, thinking laterally of there could be 4-3-1 lineups that are good. There could be 3-3-2 lineups that are good. There could be, depending on the size of the slate, like, oh, do you play 5-3? Or do you play 5 and 3 one-offs? Well, there could be plenty of good 5-3 lineups. Maybe there's 5-1-1 lineups. Like you're still thinking by asking the question, you're thinking too linearly. Of like you shouldn't be playing any construction. You should just be playing good lineups. So like when I build in lineup HQ, I don't put like, oh, I'm playing 100% 5, today's 6-game slate. I'm playing 100% 5X and just running it. It's like, no, I may be playing 4-3s. I may be playing 3-3s. I may, how is everything going to shake out? I need to see that first. It may turn out that there aren't many 3-3 type lineups that are good enough. It may turn out that there may not be 5-3 lineups that are not going to be like super owned unless I want to stack against this chalk pitcher or something. So just going into a slate and thinking of all these variables and weighing lineups, that pros and cons, every lineup you make, there will always be a negative. There's no like, oh, this is the best lineup and there's nothing wrong with it. Because obviously, if you build like a cash lineup, right? What's the big negative in MLB 2A cash lineup? It's that it's not correlated. It's the highest projected median lineup based on your projections, but it's mostly one-offs. It's a mess of whatever. So whoever the highest value is getting the most salary. So that's not good for GPP. So it's like, but it is the best projected lineup. So it's like, but it's still not good for GPP. Then you go to the most correlating. Oh, I'm going to build 5-3 on DraftKings. And the 5-3, I'm going to play the pitchers of the two teams that are 5-3. Because obviously if they score the most points, the pitcher's more likely to get a win. So now you're super duper correlated. And you take a look at that and you go, well, it's also chalk and it's not projected as well. And you go, okay, well, now what do I do? It's like, okay, well, then you go to the opposite extreme. It's like people think too much in these, you got to do one thing or the other thing rather than build a lineup. What's its positives? What's its negatives? Oh, I'm going to play the chalk Yankees that are projected well. It's like, okay, then where do you find leverage in your lineup? Oh, I'm not going to play the chalk Yankees. I'm going to play this 1% owned Pirate stack. It's like, okay, where are you going to find projection in the rest of your lineup? Because those three things go hand in hand. So a lineup with the chalk Yankees and contrarian pitcher versus chalk garbage stack and 2 stud pitchers and a stud pitcher, they may end up, if we ran this out 10,000 times, to end up earning you the same amount of money, right? They may end up being the same expected value. It's 2 different lineups, 2 different positives and negatives. One has a higher projection, but less leverage. One has more leverage, but less projection. We run this out 10,000 times. Obviously, the one with the garbage stack in it wins less often, but when it wins more money. The one with the chalk Yankees may win more often, but when it wins less money. It comes in more times than not. It comes in 40th place and 30th place. And the garbage stack comes in first, or a lot of times doesn't even cash at all. But once you run it out 10,000 times, they end up, at the end of 10,000 times, you end up with the same amount of money. So it's like, if that's the case, that means most lineups are equal to one another, even though they're weighed differently on the variables that you're going after. So when people ask questions of, well, it's a 6-game slate, should I stack 5-3? It's like you could play 2-2-2. You could do that. Obviously, a lineup that's 2-2-1-1 has very limited correlation. It better have high projection and high leverage, though, right? If you're playing in GPP, are you able to make it up in those other two levers? If you can, then I can't tell you that lineup is bad, right? People would look at it and go, why are you playing a 3-2-1-1-1? Like, I thought it's baseball. I thought we stack. It's like, well, if your 3-2-1-1-1 has enough leverage for the size of the contest that it's in, I can't argue against it, right? If it's projected well enough to make up for the lack of correlation and has enough leverage to make up for the lack of correlation, then that's just as good as a highly correlated lineup that has little leverage and little projection. So those all three things you have to weigh in your head at once, not one at a time. So to me, that's the difference between thinking linearly and laterally. But James, you could see how people can get frustrated. I mean, obviously, with the answers that I tend to give, right, where people ask those types of questions, and I go, well, you're asking me a question that relies on four other decisions or two other variables that you're not giving me any information on. So, like, how am I'm not going to think linearly by going, well, should I play this guy or that guy? It's like, I don't know what contest you're in. I don't know what lineup you're in. I don't know. I have no idea. So there's no possible answer to that question. You have to weigh these things all at once. So you have to know the lineup. You have to know the contest it's in. And then you have to know what other people are doing, obviously, for the leverage angle of it. And then it makes nearly any lineup justifiable to some extent. Obviously, you're going to be looking at projections. But it makes is it totally crazy for me to fade the 80% owned pitcher? Like, no, it's never totally. Nothing in DFS is totally crazy on a one slot level, right? Is it totally crazy for me to play all the ninth hitters in all the 12 lineups today and play two relief pitchers? Yeah, that's crazy. Right. You probably shouldn't do that.
I was going to say, we don't say never very often when we talk. We make an effort to be like, well, sometimes and maybe we play the gray areas. But I mean, 2 years ago when Gordon Hayward was min priced and he was starting and he didn't have any restrictions, that would be crazy to fade that situation. But
it's still fadeable.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. And
right.
And my models, I remember that day specifically because I fought with myself about whether I should be playing him or not, because I figured he would be 96% owned and my models had him hitting value 92% of the time. And I was like,
he's overowned. He's slightly overowned.
There's 3%. There's 3% leverage that I get here if I end up fading him. But it's
you could. Hard. I mean, there's no. It's not 100. It's never going to be 100%.
Right. But crazy doesn't imply 100% either. Crazy implies maybe that 2%. I don't know. That's a discussion for another time.
But that's not crazy. Crazy is playing guys pinch hitters. That's crazy.
Oh, you mean like
playing pinch hitters on a classic slate?
Sure.
It's not even that crazy playing it on a showdown slate. I still don't think you do it, but playing pinch hitters on a showdown slate, at least okay. Like Pablo Sandoval seems to hit a home run every time he pinch hits. Right. So I'm going to play Pablo. So no, you shouldn't be doing that.
I think that, and one thing that I really try to put across in my community as well is don't ask me 1v1s because it really is just, I like looking at full lineups and I like helping people put together full lineups, but a 1v1 so often I'm just going to be like, what do the projections say? What do the rankings say? Because that's just what I'm going to tell you. Like, I'm going to go with the same thing. I like thinking more of the decisions of, okay, Freddie Peralta is going to be 80% owned, right? Like, what are the chances that I should be using a stack against him? What are the chances that I should be utilizing him? Can I build a lineup with a stack against him that projects well enough and like has the other, high ranking stacks? Like, I think that it was a couple days ago where the Cubs were up against Huascar. I cannot pronounce his last name, but like the Braves pitcher.
What, Inoa?
Yeah.
Well, no, yeah, that was the slate where I played Williams. I played the other side of the game.
Yeah, and I suggested to fade Wainoa because, like, I mean, I have my reasonings behind it, and I put it in the pitching notes, and people were like, "Well, he's only 6,700." It's like,
and so he was 70% owned.
And he was super owned. He was 65% owned or something. And I was like, I'd just rather play Casey Mize because I think the Casey Mize is a better all-around pitcher. Now that did not work out very well, but that's
it still worked out. And Noah only had like 2 points.
Yeah. Well, Wainoa actually, I think Mays finished with like 2 points and Wainoa finished with like -2 or something like that.
No, he got enough strikeouts. It was like 2.2 or something.
Okay. So they were like the same. But
the point is that the ownership difference between the two shouldn't have been that dramatic.
Right. And it was a difference of 40 points. It was 40% own difference there.
Right.
And the decision there is, okay, well, you can take Bosker, who was at like a 12 K per 9 or something and projected for, I don't know, 20 points across the industry or something like that. Or you can take Casey Mize, who's going to project for 14 points, but the difference in the ownership can justify the difference in the projection. Likewise, taking the Cubs against Bosker and Wainoa and taking that gives you this massive leverage point to where you're able to play whatever other chalk you want to take. You can take Javi Baez, Wilson Contreras and Javi Baez, which ended up being like the nuts combination of that team, and pair them up with the chalk stack and with the other chalk pitcher who was it on that slate?
Sonny Gray.
Who was it?
I think it's Sonny Gray. Was that the Sonny Gray slate?
No. Yeah. No. It was Sonny Gray. You're right. Yeah. And you can pair that up, and now you have the Cubs at 2% against the 60% owned player, and there you go. Like,
there you go.
You can end up.
But the point you're making is that it's not like, oh, but that's the right decision. It's like, no, the expected value of that lineup is as good as if you play Wainoa and another like if you did something like, I'm going to stack the Bray. Like, imagine you stacked against Sonny Gray. It's like, well, that's the same thing as stacking against Inoa. Let's say instead of, now you're going to play Gray Inoa, but now you're going to play whatever, Pirate stack. That's unknown. Like, that could be, we're talking about lineups that are about equal to one another, but they contain completely different players, because what one thing does well, the other thing doesn't do well. Like, here are these lineups that are super, you're going to stack against chalk pitchers, super duper leverage. Obviously the projection is going to be lower, right? So like if they get blown up, like, you make up all those, the projection doesn't matter anymore because you're making it all up in the leverage of having all these points. You're making it up in relative value. But then you look at the other side, where here's a lineup that high projection, not as much leverage. And you go, well, the fact that you have less leverage means you're making it up in projection. I mean, like, it equals out to one another. So if you ask me which lineup to play between the two of them, the answer could be whichever one you want.
And I think that it also has to do with what you want to accomplish in the contest and what contest you're in, right? Like, for me personally, I would rather have to be right about less decisions than I would like. I would rather have to be right less and get paid for it more than being right more and getting paid for it less. You know what I mean? Like, I would rather be able to look at a lineup and look at those three levers and probably err towards the correlation and the leverage side rather than the projection side, just because, and that's just because that's the nature of baseball to me, is projections are
well, the variance in baseball is so high. When people ask me, James, when people think it's more like NBA, because I'll get NBA people in the MLB chat on the Discord.
Yeah.
And they'll go, how many median points should I sacrifice for the size? I'm like, dude, one swing of the bat is 14 points in MLB. Like, one swing of the bat could be 14 points. Okay.
2 swings of the bat and you're out of the cash because 30% on Trae Young hit a home run and you had Soto.
Right. But I'm just saying that, remember, one swing of the bat could be, because that's a solo home run on DraftKings.
Yeah.
So you put someone on base, you put a walk here at the 20 points could, like, that's not like 20-point differences between lineups is not as dramatic. A 20-point difference in NBA is light years. I mean, like, you're an Alpha Centauri at that point, because obviously it's not an event-driven sport. So in order to make up 20 points, there needs to be baskets and assists and rebounds and all this other stuff. And baseball, like Luis Rengifo, home run, done. You made it up. There you go. You made it up. So you can't think in that mindset of like, how many median points do I give up for X amount of leverage like that? Now, obviously, there are lineups that are extremely low projected that you probably wouldn't play. The goal is in the contest is to play lineups that have higher expected value than the other lineups in the contest, not the ones that have the most, right? It's hard to figure out what the most is to begin with. What you have to do is just have better lineups than your opponents. So like questions like this, like even with like I keep on going back to this, that and I show people on the show people overthink. I think MLB DFS is the most overthought DFS sport there is. Like the amount of thought that I put into NBA to make a lineup is like 10 times more than MLB. NFL, 10 times more than MLB. Even NFL, 10 times more than MLB. MMA, that's all those types of sports, those are easy, right? Because you just like give me uniques and everyone's negatively correlated to one another. It's not that hard. But people like But Bongo Fiesta. In fact, I have to say that's his username. But Bongo Fiesta is talking about getting stuck playing in stacks with the batters back to back. Like as far as like 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 9, 1, 2, 6, 7, 8. I don't care about it. I've gotten to the I went from gaps are okay to I literally don't I pay no attention to it. Because if you run the correlation of all the players, if you run across baseball, because I saw this. This is the reason why I don't care about it anymore. Each player's ceiling, so the 1 to 9 hitters or 1 to 8 in the National League. Obviously, when a team scores 12 runs, the ceilings of each player is correlated to one another. I mean, that's the reason why you stack. I mean, that's essentially. So the higher the score of the game is, the more that all the players' ceilings correlate to one another. What's the difference between the third guy in the lineup ceiling and the fourth guy in the lineup ceiling? What's the difference between a one gapper, the first guy in the lineup versus the third guy in the lineup versus the 8th guy in the lineup? If you take a look and do that, the higher in the order are more correlated, but only by a very marginal amount. So if you stack 1, 2, 3, 4, obviously you're getting the 4 best hitters. I mean, like the reason why you do 1, 2, 3, 4 is because they're more likely to get more at bats because they're at the top of the order, and they're better hitters because that's why they bat at the top of the order. But typically they're a little bit more expensive because they're at the top of the order. They're better baseball players. But like if you were to play 1, 2, 3, 5 versus 1, 2, 3, 4, the correlation is like is so marginal, like 0.01 difference. If you were to play 1, 2, 3, 8, it's like 0.02 different. Like it's so marginal that as long as you're playing 4 guys, 5 guys from the same team, who cares what the order is? Like if you could make that up, that marginal in whatever else you have projection or leverage, then who cares? Like it's so you know how in NBA, James, where I say that when in doubt, if you pick a guy from the other side of the game of a guy that you're playing, you know, kind of we do that type of correlation.
Yeah.
We say that it's a weak correlate. We say that that's not don't make that a hard, fast rule. The correlation between both sides of a game is weak. And all correlations in NBA are weak. There's more correlation in NBA for that than there is of the gaps of the hitter in your MLB lineup for ceiling. Okay? So if you were to play 1, 3, 6, 8 as your 4-man stack, the difference between that and 1, 2, 3, 4 is less than picking 2 sides of a game in an NBA game. We don't even care about that, right? So it's less than that. So when people get this consumed with, well, can I play the 8th hitter? Can I play these 2 guys? Like I've gotten to the point where I just build my lineups and whatever fits. It's just some lineups have the 9th hitter in it. Some lineups miss the. I mean, it is what it is. It's just I'm taking 4 guys on FanDuel. I'm taking 5 guys on DraftKings. It doesn't really matter. Doesn't really matter. A lot of times, if anything, I'm trying to include like the stud. Right? It's hard to see the Nationals putting up 12 runs and Juan Soto going 0 for 5, right? Right. It's hard. The Angels put up 12 runs and Mike Trout sitting there with no points. Like to me, those are the types of things I'm more likely to include than caring whether or not of the gaps in the batting order. Only because the correlations between it's more important to have 5 guys from a team than it is to have the order. Well, if I'm playing 8-9, I'm playing 8-9-1-2 because it's a wraparound. Dude, play 8-9-5-6, play whatever. Don't worry about it. They're all, the ceilings are correlated. And as long as this team puts up 10 plus runs, you're going to want 4 or 5 guys from this team, and you're not going to care which order they're in, right? Obviously, the bottom of the order, less plate appearance expectation, but that goes along with the projection side, not with the correlation side. So, like, if you play a 6, 7, 8, 9 type of stack, obviously you're going to get less at bats. Obviously, the projection is going to be lower. Obviously, the leverage is going to be higher because people tend to not play lower in the order hitters. So you're making up the fact that, oh, you're getting a slightly lower plate appearance expectation, which is a slightly lower projection, but you're playing part of the stack that's going to be 2% and 4% owned. So you made up the difference there. So when people are like, oh, I'm going to play the top 4 hitters for the Dodgers that are all 30% owned. It's like, well, how do I get different? I'm going to play the whole bottom of the order. I said, why don't you just play Edwin Rios batting 8th instead of one of the top 4 hitters? And that's it. Oh, yeah, but the gap in between, like, who cares? If they're putting up 18 runs, Edwin Rios is going to bat 5 or 6 times and have guys on base, and he's going to do perfectly fine, right? And we've seen plenty of times where the random 6th hitter, he's the one that's 0 for 4 for no apparent reason, right? The guy that's batting second is somehow Justin Turner never got in on the action, right? I mean, like, so so thinking in those terms, like, once you start peeling this stuff away, once you start thinking laterally and not linearly, you start wondering, like, why have you been worrying about all this? Like, when the people, should you do this? Should you do that? Should you do this? Dude, I pick teams and I make combinations and that's it. I'm done. I mean, like, I look what teams are under-owned for their expectation, right? I take a look at the projections. I take a look at the ownership and I go, oh, this team seems under-owned, right? So you know what I do? I play them, right? And then I look at what's another team that's under-owned? Oh, okay, that team seems under-owned. We'll play them too. Then I'm going to see what teams project well, what pitchers project well. I'm like, okay, if I'm already getting my leverage with these teams that seem under-owned, that means I can play some Yankees in those lineups. That means I can play the stud pitcher that's 60% owned in some of those lineups. That's like, well, if I'm going to play this expensive stack that's going to be under-owned, I need to find some cheap pitcher. And maybe I find a cheap pitcher that's only 8% owned. Okay, now this lineup makes sense. Then okay, how many lineups am I making? Whatever that number is, give me as many of those combos or whatever. And if I have the 8th hitter in the 2 of my lineups, then fine with me, right? That's the way it works. I mean, people don't believe me. I've done this on this show. Like, that's MLB DFS. And now I don't have 100 lineups. It's like, if you do building 1 or 3 lineups, choose the most under the one that you have to just curtail your decisions more. That's it. So instead of me, I'm picking 5 stacks. You pick the best one. I can pick the best one. When I play single entry, that's what I do. Like, I could play 100 entries and then also in my single entry lineup go, okay, out of all these 5 stacks that I think are under-owned, which is the best route to go? Best, I mean, now it's marginal. Now it's like, which one? I'm going to choose this one. And then there, you run with it. Well, what made you choose that one over the other 5? About 10 seconds of thinking and then just deciding because it's baseball and anything could happen. So one of these 5, I like all these 5. There you go. They're under-owned. But obviously in single entry, you get even the more condensed ownership. So maybe there's a slight difference in that. But other than that, you shouldn't be spending that much time making decisions in MLB DFS. I mean, it's just like, what? I just don't see the point. James, do you see the point in it? I mean,
I kind of disagree with your thoughts on correlation. Just because.
No, but it's Ron. You can't disagree with me. The math is correct.
Let me chat for a sec.
Okay.
So Mike Leone and Logan Hitchcock over at Daily Roto did a really good study on the different correlative nature between batters and how much you are losing if you're going from like a 1 gap to a 2 gap to a 3 gap. You do lose out on basically all of the correlation that you can have after you've skipped 3 batters in a batting order. Now
that's for median. That's for median, though.
Right. That being said, and I'm getting to that.
Okay.
When you are putting together a lineup that is skipping 3 batters, you're hardly ever actually skipping 3 batters, right? Because like eventually you're going to end up with the 8 hitter who is then going to lead into the 1 hitter who's going to lead into 3. It's pretty hard to lose all of the correlation possible. And if you build out with 4 to 5 players, like you're still going to have the correlation of the first 3 or 4 hitters, even if you include the 8th hitter after your 1 through 4 or whatever. It's pretty hard to lose all of the correlation in your baseball lineup. So I think that it's wrong to say that the correlation is not there and that it doesn't matter. But at the same time, like it's really hard to lose all the correlation anyway, as long as you're stacking.
Right,
so,
you're stacking 4 or 5. You're stacking half of the lineup as it is.
Right.
So how many? What? I mean, even if you stack one, if you're doing a 4-man of 1, 4, 6, 8,
like you still have the correlation of 4 through 8, and
right, and you still have the 8 to 1. You still have there, and also all what you said. That's for median.
Yeah,
for ceiling. If you're ceiling means that the team puts up 15 runs. Like everyone's correlated. Now everyone's correlated.
I just wanted to correct it because I'm the math guy and I did so much work on the math.
Well, that's why I said, James, I made it clear that it's for ceiling.
Yeah.
When you look at it for ceiling, not for median.
Where correlation matters is in NFL. I mean, that's really the sport that I think that correlation matters the most, and maybe NHL. I haven't done too much work.
No, NHL definitely with the lines. You have to get the double assist, of course.
Well, because assists and shots on goals count so much that I do think that matters a bit more than baseball. But regardless, I think that like saying that the correlations don't matter, I think is not quite right. But I think that it's really hard to get rid of so much correlation if you're stacking a lineup that you really have to worry about it anyway. So I think you're both right and wrong on that. And I'm just the champion of semantics right now. So I just wanted to say that. But outside of that, when you're putting together a lineup and you're trying to focus on, oh, well, who should I be using in the lineup? Like in my models, I have 2 different hitter rankings. Like I have a projection set that's built off of a simulation program. And then I have a ranking set that's built off of the player baselines. And if you look at that and you see, oh, Jose Abreu projects for the best and he has the best rating on the White Sox, you should probably play Jose Abreu in your lineup. To your point of Mike Trout is not going to go 0 for 5 if the Angels score 12 runs. Like he's probably going to be part of it. So I think that in terms of correlation, the correlation is still there, but what matters is taking the hitters that are like, you should bolster down your lineup. If you're stacking the Dodgers, you should bolster down your lineup with the Dodgers that matter and then surround them the best that you can with other Dodgers that fit.
No, that's not a hard, fast rule either.
I mean, I personally, for me, I would not be fading all of Cody Bellinger and like both Cody Bellinger and Mookie Betts. I wouldn't be fading them both if I'm playing the Dodgers.
Well, probably not. Yes, probably not.
So right. That's why.
But it's not you have a 3-man lower. You put together Turner, Taylor, Smith, and
I guess I should say that as a 5-man.
Right, that's a 5-man. Less likely.
Yeah. Significant, right. And I would
significantly less
closer to crazy than less likely.
No, I don't. Nothing's crazy
for a 5-man stack. Like I'm not.
Nothing's crazy. It's not crazy.
I said closer to crazy.
Okay.
You're leaning into your elbow is brushing up against crazy if you fade Mike Trout when you have a 5-man Angel stack.
Right, but still, I'm looking at the YouTube chat and still people. I see a lot of questions that are based around linear thinking. And it's I've always thought laterally. So to me, it's like
well, it's what I said earlier in this. It's really, really hard to explain the difference, and it comes with a lot of experience. Like
but James, you do simulations, right?
I do.
Okay, so you can simulate a slate.
I do, yeah.
Okay, so on this 6-game slate coming up today, I'm just going to show it on the screen for like let's say DraftKings. Okay, you could. If we had ownership, which we don't, if I were to give you the percentile projections, and I were to give you the ownership, you'd be able, and then the contest that we're simulating the 20,000 entry, whatever the contest, you'd be if I were to give you all the lineups in the contest, all 20,000 lineups in the contest,
yeah.
You'd be able to simulate the slate and tell me how many times each lineup wins.
Yes.
And what the payout structure is, right? You could put in the payout structure of that contest and run out a simulation knowing all 20,000 lineups and then run it out 10,000 times, 1,000 times. And then show me what the ROI of each lineup in the contest was.
And
right?
there are people that do that in the industry. Yeah.
Yes, I know. That's why I'm mentioning it. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So each lineup in each simulation, the lineup that won the first simulation could come in dead last in the next simulation. The ranges of outcomes are wide. So, but the goal is to make plus EV lineups. So once you simulate it out 10,000 times, whatever, make up a big number, and you'd simulate the actual slate, if you're able to project ownership well enough. I mean, once the lineup, everything locks, like once the last game locks, you could literally take the whole thing and you could do it, right? And you go, now that we know and everything is whatever, you could run that simulation and you have, let's say, 20 lineups in the contest. And you could compare the expected value. Now it's not expected value. Now it's the actual value. And what the ROI of your lineup is, obviously, if your projections are accurate, right? Based on your projections, what the return of each individual lineup would be on average per contest. When you do that, James, you may see a lineup that returns X, 12% return, and the next lineup returns 11.98% return, and those two lineups could have like completely different players in them, right?
Yeah,
one could be an Angel stack, one could be a Dodger stack, one could be it. But those lineups, if you ran 10,000 times, you may look at these two lineups and go, they're equal to each other, right? So it's like you look at one lineup and go, well, this lineup has a lot of projection. This is a lineup that wins when the chalk hits and the stud pitcher fails. This is a lineup where the 1% owned guy put up 3 home runs. I mean, like you take a look at all of this ROI stuff. So when you do that and you look and you go, okay, the top lineup, highest expected value, had a 29% average return, which is probably too high, but 29% and then 28% and 20. I'm just trying to make up numbers to go all the way down. Then you have lineups, 80% of the lineups are going to have negative 1% return, negative 2% return, negative. So you look at all these lineups and you go, I want to play as many of the lineups that are in the top 20% of this, right? Top 25%. I want to play as many of those lineups. And you look at those lineups and okay, what was the most profitable thing to do? And you look at the top and you go, the most profitable thing to do was either this or that or this or that. And you go, well, which one? It's like, no, all 4 of them were equally as profitable, even though the win conditions on all 4 of those lineups are negatively correlated to one another. Right? So you could take the most profitable lineup is the one that had the stud pitcher in it and the garbage stack. The second most profitable one is the stack against that very same pitcher. And you're like, well, how could both happen on one slate? It's like the probability of both lineups are the same.
Right.
They're the same. It's just on this slate, either one of the two things happens. We don't know which one. We're simulating them out 10,000 times. But that's how you make decisions in DFS, is by, as long as I keep on making decisions that are profitable over a long period of time, the more and more decisions I make day after day after day, the more and more likely I am profitable. So when you simulate everything out 10,000 times, the most profitable lineups could all look differently. You're not going to see a simulation, most slates, where, the top 100 most profitable lineups are all Angel stacks, right? Or you're not going to see that. You're going to see a mess of now maybe more Angel stacks than most. And then now you compare it to how owned they were. And you're like, yeah, I should have played more Angels. They were owned. They were 18% owned, but they showed up in, 29% of the top line. I mean, then it's like, okay, maybe I should have played more Angels if you simulate it out all the time. But when you think in that mentality, like those top lineups, those most profitable lineups, the top 10%, they could be 5 threes, 4 threes, 2-2s. You may see some 3-2-2-1s. And you go, well, the 3-2-2-1 is actually 12% profitable. Yeah, but I thought you're supposed to stack 5-3. Like, no, there could be some lineups. Now, there's more likely to be less 2-2-2-1-1 type lineups that are, if you simulate it out 10,000 times to be profitable, but it doesn't mean there's none of them. There could be. Certain slates, there may not be as many 5-mans on DraftKings that are as profitable. There may be more 4-3-1s that are profitable. There may be, do I pay up for 2 stud 10K starting pitchers? Maybe if we simulate this out, maybe there's literally no profitable lineup that looks like that. Maybe there's none of the cheap stacks simulate out high enough that it gets you a positive return. So it's like, well, on this particular slate, the double stud were unprofitable. Then on another slate, the double stud could have like 70% of the top spots, right? Just like, the Tigers Pirates stack with the 2 stud pitchers, like that ends up being the most profitable lineup. Yeah, it doesn't win that often, but when it does, it wins like all the money at the top. So that's where the return is. But by doing, even if you're not doing that simulation, knowing that, simulate it out in your head, how often does this lineup win? Now, you may not know the exact number, but just know that however often that lineup wins, there's another, and when it doesn't win, some other lineup wins. And then when these two don't, some other lineup wins. So there's no, if the Red Sox don't put up 8 million points, well, who wins, right? If I'm going to stack the Angels and the Angels only put up 4 runs, then which stack wins? Well, some other stack wins. Well, we're never thinking in terms of 100% or 0%. So if you think the Angels win 18% of the time, that means 82% of the time some other stack is winning, right? So when that stack wins, that's going to win all the money. And that's going to win. So you may look at all these lineups one by one to each other. You may build 30, 40 lineups and go, I can't tell which one is better than the other. Those levers, the projection lever, leverage levers, all equal. I got the good balance between them in all these 40 lineups. Which one is the best lineup? Who knows? Probably if I simulated these 40 lineups out on the slate just like that, I'm going to guess that they come around the same range of each other. I'm hoping they're going to be positively profitable, but most likely they're going to be, this lineup's 11% profitable. This lineup's 8% profitable. This line's 12%. And they're different and they're different stacks. And then someone will ask me, so do you build 5-3? Do you build 5-1? I'm like, dude, this stack is 4-3-1. This stack is 5-1-1. This stack is 4-4 with this. And when we ran up the simulation, they're all kind of equal to each other. So when you're talking about hard, fast, linear thinking of, do you play 5-3? Oh, do you do that? None of those questions matter. None of them do. Can you find lineups that look like that? I'm sure you could probably find a lineup that is 4-3-1 that is just as good as a 5-3 lineup. That's just as good as a 5-1-1 lineup. That's just as good at thinking in those terms of what is my construction? What does that matter? Should I play the stud pitcher or not? I'm sure you could find profitable lineups that don't have the stud pitcher in it. So does that mean I play him or don't play him? But that means it depends on the lineup. You're thinking too linearly. You're thinking, no, it's not about playing him or not. It's what lineup is he in? But then you could show me tons of lineup. You could show me on this slate coming up, the 6-game slate? You could probably show me 50 or 100 lineups. And what do you think of this lineup? I'll go, sounds good, looks good. As long as you tell me what contest it's in. For large fields, show me 100 lineups. I'll go, okay, that looks fine. How about this lineup? That looks fine too. How about that lineup? That looks fine too. How about that lineup? And then you go, which one is better? I go, I don't know. They all look about the same. Which one would you play? I don't know. All 4? Well, I can't play all 4. I can only play 1. Close your eyes and pick.
I feel bad because I do run into that pretty often and people they build pretty good lineups. I've taught people how to build pretty good lineups, and then they'll show me a lineup. They'll be like, can I get your opinion on this lineup? Sure, dude. Yeah. I'm happy to look at it. Does this look okay? Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Right.
That's all that it is, because you're right. I think people overthink things pretty dramatically when it comes to MLB DFS, and especially especially if people become results oriented and they say, oh, well, I should have had this guy instead of this guy. Like the other day, I played a St. Louis stack when they went off against whoever it was, but I didn't have Yadier Molina. I ended up having Wilson Ramos instead. And I'm looking at him like, that sucks. But like, people can tilt about that and they'll be like, I should have done this. I should have looked at this. I should have looked at this. Like you had a 5-man St. Louis stack and like, it just didn't pay off with the right guy. It right. Is what it is, man.
I typically stack with my catcher though. At DraftKings.
I know, but I had Wilson Ramos in my stack in another spot. It's just the way that, I had a 5-3 and I had Wilson Ramos on a Tiger stack. So
on a Tiger right on the other right, of course, which is fine. And I look at that lineup, I go, that seems fine. Yeah, I'm typically looking at lineups like that to think, are you too extreme in one direction? You look at it, someone says, take a look at my lineup, and I look and I go, this is way too chalky. Right? Yeah. Or I look at the lineup and I go, this is way too like it's way, like you don't have to get like this wacky. Right? You take a look and they go, especially if you're not playing large field GPPs. Single entry, 500 person contest, and they're fading like they're playing 2% owned pitchers and a 5% owned stack. And I go, why? Like, do you need to do this? If you want to play, put this in a large field contest. It's fine. That's not crazy. But this, it's like, you can. It's fine. Projects 26 points lower than everyone else. And why don't you just take, if you're going to pay that low owned stack, why not just take the best projected pitchers? Why not? It could win, sure, yes. But that's what I'm looking at. I'm like, it's not the individual stuff, like whether or not, well, should I be 4-3-1 or 5? That I'm just like, is it too much leverage or is it too little leverage? That's really what, if they're large field stuff, a lot of times there's no such thing as too little left. You can play anything. I mean, like, it's just, well, I'm playing 1%, 1%, 1%, 1%, and it's not fine. Do I play the 7th hitter or the 8th hitter in this garbage stack? Who cares? They're both low owned and they both project about the same. Whatever.
They're both on a bad team.
Right. They're both on a bad team. I don't know. Whichever one you want. But I mean, I see tons of people that play large field GPPs and they play lineups that look like almost close to my cash lineup. Right? It looks like, oh, great. This is the lineup that I'm playing in a 100-man contest. Like you're not gonna win $50,000 with this. I mean, I'm playing the chalk stack and the 2 chalk pitchers and the chalk one-off. It's like, yeah, but I got the 2% owned, Rex Grossman or something, Robbie Grossman. Like, why? Like that to me, that doesn't make any sense. But I could judge based on those extremes. But anything in the middle, it's like, sure, looks fine. Go for it. Have fun.
Yep.
That's why I just wanted to get that off my chest. But we can still. The thing is, James, we could say that for an hour straight, and we're still going to get the same questions, right?
It's all teaching opportunities, right?
Just repeat ourselves, and hopefully people get it, right?
Yep.
I mean, you saw the one that I literally did my process from before the slate.
Yeah.
And then people DM me and goes, so what are you not? Someone asked me, what are you not showing us? Right? That someone literally asked me that. She said that can't be your process. That's too simple. What are you not showing us? I go, nothing. That's how I make my lineups. He goes, it can't be that simple. I said, the projections do everything for you. It's just a matter of what strategic thing you want to do.
Right.
I'm building 100 lineups. So it's like, I'm not going to get picky one lineup by one lineup in a 100 lineup set. I got a half an hour to go. So just like, what teams are under owned? Give me a bunch of those. I'll throw in some chalk here. I'll cap some guys there. I'll make sure that I have diversification, which is not a strategy, but just so I don't lose all my money or win. I want a nice swath of players, and then I upload it. Well, no, what are you not showing us? Like what? I'm not showing nothing.
Yesterday that I had in my, well, I was asleep, but my community was having last night, and they're like, well, what are these guys looking at that is letting them choose these one-offs?
Nothing.
And I'm like, it's all in the projections, man. Like the reason why you look at projections is because you trust that they're taking into account the things that you would look at when you're doing it yourself. Like you just pay somebody else to do it. You're just paying me over at Pater to do that for you. And then hopefully I don't suck. Right. Like,
right.
That's all that it is. And people just overthink it. And
Yeah, over. I'll say it again. I'm just gonna say it every single week. I'm gonna make sure I work it in. Every single slate is one at bat out of an entire game. Just build your lineups. Don't overthink it. You'll get you didn't get the double dong this time, but hopefully you get it next time. And if you keep building good lineups, then you're gonna end up making money. That's all.
Right. I get some lineups, like some lineups in the top 10, top 20. And I'm like, oh, unless if I would have switched this guy for that, it's like, but I'm not switching guys. I'm not, it's whatever it turns. Oh, okay. I don't have Acuna as a one-off in my red stack that went off. I have Jose Abreu. And then I look, and Acuna is 55% owned, and Abreu is 14% owned. And I look at this lineup in 11th place, and I go, had I known that this is the ownership discrepancy between Acuna and Abreu, I probably would have played Abreu anyway, even though Acuna hit 2 home runs. I mean, so what am I going to, even if I did manually build it, I still look at that lineup and go, yep, I guess it comes in would have came in first if I would have just put the chalk piece there. But I mean, I don't hand build. So it's like, if I put Acuna in that lineup, it actually would have been it would have been too chalky, right? Past my threshold. So it's a lineup that I couldn't have built. So what am I tilting over? It's a lineup I couldn't have built.
Right.
And it's a lineup that I purposely wouldn't have wanted to build. Right. I looked at it if that was the last piece, if I was thinking linearly and I have a utility spot and I could put in Acuna or Abreu, and I look at the 4 times discrepancy in ownership, I put in this lineup with the chalk pitcher and some chalk pieces in there. It's like I put Abreu in there. There you go. Done. And then, so I came in 11th instead of first. There's nothing to tilt. I couldn't have made that lineup. And if I was actually choosing it, I would have chose Abreu. So I just move on to the next slate. Just chalk donkeys get there, right? It's not like I didn't play Acuna that slate. You remember that slate.
Was it the one where people decided that they wanted to play Acuna against their own pitcher?
Well, I think some people did. I mean, he projected the best.
No, that was touted. They were
really
telling people to do that. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I was livid when he hit that home run off of his own pitcher. Because I was like, all these people freaking get there on this decision. It wasn't even like a 3-game slate. It was like a 6-game slate.
Yeah, it was a 5 or 6 game slate that day.
And people were touting playing Acuna and just saying, oh, well, just, you just eat the Acuna home run and, it's a net positive. And it's like, oh, please keep telling people that.
Well, I just didn't know. I mean, I played less of him only because he was on FanDuel. He was 55% owned.
He was 45% on Draftkings.
Right. But that's the point. And then you take any of the other hitters in that range, and it's like, why is Acuna? Yeah, he's in the best spot against the best. I mean, I get it, but it shouldn't be 4 times ownership discrepancy.
No.
That's the type of thing. But it doesn't mean I played 0 Acuna. It just means Acuna gets fit in lineups that he makes more sense in because the rest of the lineup is less owned. Right. That's it. That's it. So which one do you do? Whichever one you want. That's why people come and they think that I'm, oh my God, I watched for an hour. I didn't learn anything. Right.
I think people learn things.
I hope they do. If you learn something, hit that thumbs up button, hit the thumbs, hit Eli's in the office today. So he had to do some travel. So give him some extra thumbs and hit the subscribe button. If you're new, hit the notification bell. We got Grinders Live coming up today. Grinders Live NBA, MLB later. It's Dean. It's someone. I don't look at the schedule. There'll be people on. There'll be people. There'll be human beings talking to you about MLB and baseball and basketball stuff later today. James, you're at have you gotten a domain yet?
Okay, look, yes. Okay, so I do have a domain. I did buy it. I went right after the show last week.
But it's not connected yet.
Not entirely. I set it up. I set up the DNS. It is redirecting, but it's giving me that little warning thing because I didn't set it up correctly because I'm a noob. So I need to keep
DFS. Let me take a look. PayDirtDFS.com. Okay, it's redirected. What's wrong with that?
Oh, did it work?
I mean, it's a redirect, but I mean, you should probably not make it you should make it the A name of the site.
The A name? Okay. All right. Well, oh, hey, it works. It works. Yeah. Okay. There we go.
At least it redirects. At least you could say PayDirtDFS.com and it does go.
I can.
Right.
Okay.
You can at least say that
because it was giving me the little warning of like, oh, this person's trying to steal your identity or whatever.
I don't know. Maybe the
Oh,
DNS.
it's working now. Hey, cool. Okay, so yeah, so I did do that. You can't yell at me about it anymore. And
No, but you still have to make it the domain name. You just
I
made
don't
a
know what
redirect.
that
You didn't-
means, Jordan.
Little
work on
baby
it.
steps, I guess.
Yep, baby steps. I'll work on it more this week.
Okay, so you could go to paydirtdfs.com, right?
Yep.
You could set up an email address now.
I could.
James at paydirtdfs.com.
I could.
See, you see how it, but see, because people can email me at jordan@theoryofdfs.com. Now, does that email address exist? No, it just forwards to my Gmail, like all my other email addresses, but it makes it seem like when you're like, oh, a domain name and an email address, it's so professional. It really isn't, but it makes people think it's professional, right?
I'm getting there, man. I'll
Right.
be professional by the end of the year. I'll have
It just makes it just keeping up appearances.
Yeah, exactly. So
Right.
anyway, you can go to paydirdfs.com and you can find all my work there. You can also find me on paydirt_DFS on the Twitter machine. And yeah, you can find me and Jordan's work at theoryofdfs.com/masterclass.
Yep. So we'll be talking about this slate today, tomorrow. We go over stuff because that's what I do here, except for Mondays where we banter about stuff, try to help people out, try to teach, and yeah. So review stuff tomorrow. If you're not in my contest, I'm playing DraftKings today and not FanDuel because FanDuel has 30,000 to first, 10,000 to second, and like 1,000 to fifth. And DraftKings is doing an $8 contest today. So I'm going to be playing DraftKings today versus FanDuel. So for GPP, first time this year. So if you're not in my contests, good luck to you. But
yeah, the MLB contests don't suck today. That's cool.
Right. They don't. Right. Exactly. They don't suck today on DraftKings.
That's
Right,
like the first time all year.
Right. That's why I'm playing the GPPs on DraftKings today.
All right.
Of course, but tomorrow will be horrible. Right.
Yeah. Of course.
I'll do it for one day and that's it. But I'll review it tomorrow because I'm here every day, every weekday, right? 11 o'clock in the morning Eastern time for the DFS pregame show here on RotoGrinders.com.